Oh, come on, Ellie. You know it wouldn't be your scene. My sister Megan's voice crackled through my phone, her dismissive tone all too familiar. It's going to be hiking, waterfall climbing, night markets, adventure stuff. Not exactly your speed. I gripped my phone tighter, staring out at the vibrant Bangkok sunset from my apartment balcony. The irony of her words made me want to laugh, but instead, I kept my voice neutral. I can handle adventure just fine, Meg. I've been living in Thailand for 3 years. Living in an expat bubble in Bangkok isn't exactly roughing it, she replied. This is a real adventure trip. Mom and Dad agree he probably wouldn't enjoy it. Of course they did. In the narrative my family had constructed, I was Ellie Bennett, the predictable daughter who played it safe. The bookish one who'd never step outside her comfort zone. The boring one. What Megan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for the past 3 years, I'd been leading adventure tours through some of Thailand's most challenging terrain. I'd guided groups through dense jungles, down rushing rivers, up limestone cliffs, and into remote villages where few outsiders ever ventured. But my family wouldn't know any of that. They'd never asked. 6 weeks later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. Hello, I answered in Thai. Is this Ellie Bennett? The voice spoke English with a heavy Thai accent. This is Somkai from Northern Star Tours. Your sister Megan gave this number as an emergency contact. There has been an incident with their tour group. My heart skipped a beat. Is everyone okay? Yes, everyone is safe, he assured me. But the group is stranded. Heavy rain has caused flooding on the main trail back to base camp. Your sister and her family are at a remote village in Doi Inthana National Park. I knew exactly where they must be. Ban Huai, he was a Karen Hill tribe village I knew well. I'd led at least a dozen tours through there. I'll handle it, I said decisively. Tell my sister I'm on my way. Within 30 minutes, I was heading north in our rugged four-wheel drive truck equipped with emergency supplies. The irony wasn't lost on me. My adventure-seeking family was stuck in a remote village, while boring, predictable Ellie was coming to their rescue. By the time I reached the village, darkness was falling and the rain had intensified. Inside the community hall, about 20 bedraggled tourists sat on floor mats, looking miserable. A hairy Thai guide was attempting to explain something while an elderly village headman looked on with concern. But you said rescue teams would come today, one woman was saying. Now you're telling us it might be tomorrow? The guide smiled nervously. Very sorry, weather very bad. No can do. This is ridiculous, Jake muttered loudly. We pay premium rates for an expert guide, and now we're stuck in the middle of nowhere. At least we have shelter, my father pointed out, and the villagers have been kind. Kind won't get us back to civilization, Megan snapped. This isn't the adventure I signed up for. I stepped into the light and called out in fluent Thai to the headman. Sawadi cha, for Luan. It's good to see you again. The old man turned, his face breaking into a wide smile. Kan Ellie, we did not expect you today. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward me. My family looked stunned. Switching to English, I addressed the group. Hello everyone, my name is Ellie Bennett. I'm a senior expedition leader with Adventure Elite Tours. I understand you're having some difficulties and I'm here to help. Ellie, my mother managed. What are you doing here? How did you get here? I drove, I said simply. The good news is that we can get you all back to Chiang Mai tomorrow morning. I know an eastern route that avoids the flooded areas. As the Northern Star guy began organizing sleeping arrangements, my family approached me, still looking shell-shocked. I don't understand, Megan said. How did you even know we were here? The tour company called me. I work with another tour company. We specialize in more authentic experiences than Northern Star. You're a tour guide? My father sounded incredulous. For 3 years, I replied. Since I moved to Thailand. I lead expedition tours through northern Thailand, specializing in ecological and cultural immersion experiences. Why didn't you tell us? Megan demanded. I met her gaze steadily. Would you have believed me? You've all been so convinced that I'm not adventure material. Would it really have changed anything if I'd told you? The silence that followed was answer enough. That night, as rain drummed on the thatched roof above us, I sat with my family in the home of a Karen family I knew well. I still can't believe this, Megan said. My little sister, the adventure guide. Why didn't you ever tell us? My mother pressed. I considered my answer carefully. At first, because I wasn't sure it would last. Then, when I realized this was what I wanted to do long term, I tried to tell you. But you all seemed so convinced that I was just working some desk job, hiding from the real world. And then, I continued, when you planned this trip and specifically excluded me because I wasn't adventure material, it just confirmed what I already knew. You don't see me, you see the person you think I am. Finally, my father spoke. You're right, we've been seeing what we expected to see, not what was actually there. I'm sorry, Megan said quietly. You were always so careful growing up. Always planning, always playing it safe. People change, Meg, I said. Living abroad does that to you. It forces you to adapt, to find strength you didn't know you had. Will you show us? Megan asked suddenly. Your Thailand, I mean. Not the tourist version we signed up for, but the real thing. The parts you love. I blinked in surprise. You want me to be your guide? If you'll have us, my father said. I looked at their expectant faces. For the first time in years, they were actually seeing me, the real me, not the version they created in their minds. I'd like that, I said finally, but fair warning. My tours aren't the luxury experience you signed up for. We go off the beaten path. Way off. After today, I think we can handle it, my mother said with surprising determination. As conversation drifted to lighter topics and my family began to doze off, I stayed awake a little longer, listening to the rain. My boring, predictable life had somehow led me here, to a remote village in the mountains of Thailand, rescuing my adventure-seeking family from their adventure vacation. The morning arrived with clearing skies and a renewed sense of purpose. I woke before dawn to confer with the village headman about road conditions and organized transportation. By the time my family emerged, bleary-eyed but rested, I had already arranged everything. Good morning, I greeted them, handing out cups of strong local coffee. We'll be leaving in about an hour. The village has prepared breakfast for everyone. My father accepted his cup with an appreciative nod. You've been up for a while, haven't you? Part of the job, I shrugged. Early mornings, late nights, and a lot of problem-solving in between. As we ate breakfast, a simple but hearty meal of rice porridge, eggs, and fresh fruit, I explained our route back to Chiang Mai. It'll take about 5 hours, I told the group. The eastern road is longer but on higher ground, so we'll avoid the flooding. We'll need to cross one stream, but the village has lent us extra vehicles. The Northern Star guide, Samte, watched me with a mixture of admiration and relief. It was clear he was out of his depth in this situation. Your sister is very skilled, he said to Megan. Very respected among guides in Chiang Mai. Megan looked at me with new eyes. Apparently, there's a lot we didn't know about Ellie. The journey back was challenging but manageable. I led our small convoy of four-wheel drive trucks through mud-slicked roads and narrow mountain passes, stopping occasionally to clear debris or check the route. My family watched as I communicated effortlessly with local villagers, navigated tricky terrain, and kept the group's spirits up with stories about the region. The monsoon season is actually my favorite time to guide, I explained as we paused at a scenic overlook, the mountains wrapped in mist. The tourists are fewer, the landscapes are more dramatic, and the challenges make it interesting. Challenges like rescuing stranded family members? Jake quipped. I laughed. That's a first, actually. By mid-afternoon, we reached Chiang Mai. As the group dispersed with relieved thank yous, Somkai approached me. Adventure Elite is lucky to have you, he said sincerely. Would you consider, perhaps sometime, giving training to our guides? I'd be happy to discuss it, I replied, handing him my card. Call my office next week. After he left, I turned to my family. Well, you're back to civilization. I assume Northern Star will rearrange the rest of your tour. Actually, my mother said, exchanging glances with my father, we were hoping you might have some suggestions. Something more authentic. I smiled slowly. As a matter of fact, I do have a few days free. How would you feel about a custom tour? The real Thailand, not the tourist version. The eagerness on their faces was all the answer I needed. 2 days later, we set out on what I privately called my reality tour. I canceled the remaining bookings with Northern Star, much to their disappointment, and crafted an itinerary that showcased my Thailand. We started in Chiang Mai, but not with the typical temple tours. Instead, I took them to an early morning almsgiving with local monks, then to a market where I knew all the vendors by name. We eat breakfast at a tiny stall where the owner, an elderly woman named Chan Ying, greeted me with hugs and insisted on feeding my family her special coconut rice. She says you saved her grandson's business last year, my father said as I translated Chan Ying's rapid Thai. Something about a loan? I shrugged. His coffee farm was struggling. I brought some investors to see it, that's all. That's all, Megan repeated, shaking her head in wonder. You're like a completely different person here. No, I corrected gently. This is who I've always been. You're just seeing it for the first time. Over the next few days, I showed them my world, hiking trails I'd discovered, remote temples where tourists rarely ventured, and communities where I built relationships through years of respectful visits. We stayed in simple guest houses rather than luxury resorts, ate at local eateries instead of tourist restaurants, and traveled by whatever means made sense. Sometimes in sampos, shared pickup trucks, sometimes on motorbikes, and occasionally on foot. My family's transformation was remarkable. My mother, who had always been hesitant about foreign food, was now eagerly trying everything from spicy somtam to fermented sausages. My father, typically restrained, was conversing with locals using the Thai phrases I taught him. Jake had abandoned his expensive camera in favor of genuine experiences. And Megan, perhaps the most surprising, had stopped documenting everything for social media and started simply living in the moment. I get it now, she told me one evening as we sat on a hillside, watching the sunset over terrace rice fields. Why you stayed. Why you never told us. We wouldn't have understood. I should have tried harder to explain, I admitted. Instead, I just let the distance grow. She bumped my shoulder gently. Well, I'm glad we got lost. Even if it took nearly drowning in monsoon rains to see who you really are. I laughed. Not exactly the family reunion I would have planned, but effective. So, are you ever coming home? She asked hesitantly. I gestured at the landscape spread before us, the lush hills, the glowing sky, the distant villages with lights beginning to twinkle on. This is home, Meg. This is where I belong. She nodded slowly, finally understanding. Then we'll just have to visit more often. And next time, we'll ask for the expert guide from the beginning. As darkness fell and we made our way back to our guest house, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The gap between who my family thought I was and who I become was finally closing. They were seeing me, truly seeing me, for the first time. And I was rediscovering them too, beyond the roles we'd all fallen into so comfortably. My mother's surprising adaptability, my father's quiet curiosity, Megan's growing self-awareness, and Jake's unexpected depth. Perhaps it had taken getting lost for all of us to find our way back to each other. Our final days together passed in a blur of authentic experiences. I took them on a culinary adventure through night markets, teaching them how to haggle with vendors and identify the best street food. We visited an elephant sanctuary where I volunteered monthly, and my family helped bathe the gentle giants in the river, a far cry from the touristy elephant rides they had initially planned. You know, my father said as we watched the elephants playfully spraying water, I think we had more adventure on your tour than we would have on our original itinerary. I smiled. That's because real adventure isn't about checking items off a list. It's about genuine connections and unexpected moments. Those unexpected moments continued throughout the week. When a sudden downpour caught us on a hike, instead of rushing to find shelter, I taught them to embrace the warm rain, letting it soak through our clothes as we continued walking, laughing at how ridiculous we all looked. The real Thailand doesn't stop for rain, I explained. It adapts to it. At a small village pottery workshop, my mother discovered a hidden talent for working with clay. The elderly artisan, impressed with her natural skill, insisted she take home the simple but elegant bowl she had created. I've never made anything with my hands before, she marveled, carefully wrapping her creation. I always thought I wasn't creative. Maybe you just needed the right environment to try, I suggested. Even Jake, who had initially been the most skeptical about abandoning their luxury tour, found himself captivated by the authenticity of our experiences. This is what travel should be, he told me one evening as we sat around a campfire in a Karen village, sharing stories with the locals. Not looking at things from behind a camera, but being part of them. The most profound transformation, however, was in Megan, my adventure-seeking sister, who had always defined herself by checking experiences off a list, was learning to slow down and connect. One morning, I found her sitting cross-legged with an elderly village woman, learning to weave a simple bracelet. They didn't share a language but communicated through gestures and smiles. She reminds me of Grandma, Megan said quietly when I approached. Remember how she used to teach us crafts? I nodded, surprised by the sudden memory. Our grandmother had been patient and creative, qualities I had always associated more with myself than Megan. Maybe we're not as different as I thought, she continued, focusing on the colored threads in her hands. We just express ourselves differently. It was a moment of insight I hadn't expected from my typically fast-paced sister. As our time together drew to a close, my family's appreciation for my life in Thailand deepened. They stopped making assumptions about when I might come home or what my real career would be. Instead, they asked questions about my future plans in Thailand, offering support rather than judgment. Your tour company, my father said over dinner on our final night together. It's impressive, but I sense you have bigger ambitions. I hesitated before answering. I've been developing a new program, sustainable tourism training for hill tribe communities, teaching them how to welcome visitors in ways that preserve their culture rather than commercialize it. That sounds like important work, he nodded. Much more meaningful than the corporate job we always push you toward. It's not what I expected to be doing, I admitted, but it fits me better than anything I could have planned. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry we didn't see that sooner, Ellie. We were so busy trying to shape you into what we thought you should be. We missed who you actually are. Well, I smiled, blinking back unexpected tears. Better late than never. Later that night, Megan and I sat on the balcony of our guest house, sharing a bottle of local rice wine and watching the stars, brighter here than anywhere in the city. Remember when we were kids, she said, and I always had to go first? First down the slide, first to climb the tree, first to jump in the lake. I laughed. You were fearless. I thought I was anyway, she said, swirling the wine in her glass. But you're the one who actually moved across the world and built a life from scratch. That takes a different kind of courage. Different, not better, I pointed out. Maybe, she conceded. But I think it's time I admitted something. I've always been a little jealous of you. I nearly choked on my drink. Jealous? Of boring, predictable Ellie? Of your quiet confidence, she corrected. You never needed validation the way I did. You just knew who you were. I considered this. I don't know if that's true, Meg. I think I just got better at listening to myself instead of everyone else's expectations. She nodded slowly. I'm going to work on that. We sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of Thailand, cicadas, distant temple bells, the occasional motorbike, creating a soundtrack I had grown to love. When you visit next time, I said finally, I'll take you to the islands in the south. There's this little beach I know where phosphorescent plankton light up the water at night. Next time, she repeated, clinking her glass against mine. I'm already looking forward to it. In that moment, I felt the last pieces of our old relationship shifting into something new, something more balanced and honest. We weren't just sisters defined by our childhood roles anymore. We were adults seeing each other clearly for the first time. The next morning, as I drove them to the airport, a comfortable silence filled the car. We had said most of what needed to be said, and now there was just the quiet acknowledgement that this trip had changed us all. At the departure gate, my mother hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. Not for what you do, but for who you are. My father, never one for emotional displays, simply squeezed my shoulder. You've built something good here, Ellie, something that matters. Jake gave me a quick hug. Thanks for showing us the real deal. I'll never look at a tour brochure the same way again. And then it was Megan's turn. Instead of hugging me, she held out her hand. On her wrist was the woven bracelet the village woman had taught her to make. I made this for you, she said, tying it around my wrist, to remind you that no matter where you are, we see you now. The real you. I touched the simple bracelet, its colored threads woven into a pattern as complex as our relationship. Thank you, I said simply. As they disappeared through security, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The gap that had grown between us over the years hadn't closed completely. Perhaps it never would, but we had built a bridge across it. On the drive back to my apartment, my phone pinged with a message from Megan. It was a photo of our family at the gate, all smiling, with a caption that made me laugh out loud. Adventure family seeking baddest tour guide for next trip. Must be willing to put up with stupid questions and occasional rescue missions. Expert-level adventure material only. I typed back quickly. Applications open. References required. No guarantee of rescue next time. Her reply came moments later. Fair enough. Love you, sis. 3 simple words that somehow meant more now than they ever had before. 3 months passed quickly, filled with the usual rhythm of my life in Thailand, leading tours, developing my sustainable tourism project, and deepening my connections with the local communities. The woven bracelet Megan had given me remained on my wrist, a constant reminder of our newly forged understanding. Communication with my family had changed dramatically since their visit. Gone were the perfunctory emails asking when I would come to my senses and return home. Instead, we had regular video calls where they asked thoughtful questions about my work and showed genuine interest in my life in Thailand. My mother had started taking Thai cooking classes and proudly displayed her increasingly authentic dishes during our calls. My father, inspired by our conversations about sustainable tourism, had joined an environmental committee in his community, and Jake had scaled back his corporate hours to pursue photography with a new appreciation for authentic storytelling rather than picture-perfect moments. But it was Megan who surprised me most. She had started a travel blog, not the glossy, filtered kind that showcased perfect Instagram moments, but an honest exploration of cultural experiences that went beyond the tourist facade. Your trip changed me, she admitted during one of our calls. I can't look at travel the same way anymore. I keep thinking about the real stories behind the places I visit. One Tuesday morning, I woke to an unexpected email from her with the subject line, "Need expert consultation." Inside was a detailed proposal that made me sit up straight in bed. "I'm launching a new division at my media company," she wrote. "Authentic cultural immersion experiences. Not your typical tours, but genuine cultural exchanges. I need a consultant who understands this space. Someone who's built relationships with communities that maintain their dignity and agency. Someone who speaks the language literally and figuratively. In other words, I need you." I read the email 3 times, a smile growing on my face. She was offering me a partnership, not asking me to come home or change my path, but inviting me to expand it, to share my expertise while continuing my life in Thailand. Our first collaborative project launched 6 months later. A small group of travelers came to Thailand for what we called an immersion experience, a carefully crafted journey that emphasized meaningful exchange rather than consumption. They stayed in village homestays, participated in daily life, learned traditional crafts, and contributed to local conservation efforts. My mother and father joined this inaugural trip, not as family members, but as genuinely interested participants. I watched with pride as they engaged respectfully with communities, tried new experiences without hesitation, and demonstrated how much they had grown since their adventure vacation disaster. On the final evening of their stay, we gathered around a campfire in the same village where my family had once been stranded. The headman, now a friend and business partner in our sustainable tourism initiative, raised a toast. "To Kan Eli," he said in Thai, which my father could now partially understand, "who brings people together not just across oceans, but across understanding." Later, as the celebration continued, my father pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about something," he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your mother and I have some savings we've been holding onto. We always thought it would be a wedding gift or a down payment on a house back home." I began to protest, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. We've realized those were our dreams for you, not yours. So we'd like to invest in your sustainable tourism program instead. As proper investors, with contracts and everything. Because we believe in what you're building here." I struggled to find words, emotion tightening my throat. "You don't have to decide now," he said, squeezing my shoulder. "Just think about it." Across the fire, I caught Megan's eye. She raised her glass subtly, a knowing smile on her face. She had been part of this conversation, I realized. My adventure-seeking sister, who once excluded me from a family trip because I wasn't adventure material, was now one of my strongest advocates. The next morning, as my family prepared to leave, not for home, but for another week of exploring Thailand on their own, Megan handed me a small package. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it later," she said with a cryptic smile. After they had gone, I unwrapped the package to find a framed photo and a note. The photo wasn't new, it was from our childhood, showing us as young girls building a sandcastle together at the lake. I had forgotten about that day, how we had worked side by side for hours. Megan directing the overall vision while I focused on the intricate details of the towers. The note was simple. We were always a good team, just in different ways. Can't wait for our next adventure together. Love, Meg. I placed the photo on my desk, next to my expedition maps and community project plans. The contrast struck me, my childhood in Michigan beside my adult life in Thailand. Not as separate chapters, but as a continuous story of becoming. That evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant golds and pinks. I thought about how far we had all come since that phone call when Megan had casually excluded me from their adventure vacation. How a crisis had created an opening for truth, and how that truth had transformed not just how my family saw me, but how we saw each other. I touched the woven bracelet on my wrist. Its colors faded from months of sun and rain, but its pattern still intact. Like our family, weathered perhaps, but stronger in its newly rewoven connections. Tomorrow, I would return to my work, guiding travelers through the beautiful complexity of Thailand, helping villages develop sustainable tourism models, and building bridges between cultures. But now these efforts were connected to my family in ways I never expected. The distance between our worlds no longer a chasm but a creative space where new possibilities could grow. I smiled as the last light faded from the sky, leaving the stars to emerge one by one. Sometimes you have to get lost to find your way back to each other, and sometimes the most unexpected rescues lead to the greatest adventures of all.